Hey there, TouchDesigner developers. Jack DiLaura here with the Interactive and Immersive HQ. In this video, we're going to have a look at the new logger comp that was added to the program with the 2023 release. This is, of course, an external component that can be added into projects and customized, but also has been implemented within the TouchDesigner program itself, meaning that we can take advantage of these new features without even having to add anything to our project. So we're going to dive into using the logger comp in a variety of different ways, including looking at things like triggering the addition of messages to our log based on chop channels, saving our project, opening and closing the project file, and a number of other things. So stay tuned. We're going to jump into all of that in just a second. So we're going to start off, as we often do with new features, by having a quick look at the derivative documentation. So we've got a couple of new pages relating to the logger comp, starting with this logger page, which isn't about the comp specifically, but just a more general sort of rundown of how logging is functioning in the program. One important thing here is that we can, by using this Python expression, access this built-in logger, which is called the TD app logger. Again, this is sort of the user-facing one that we have built into the program. We've got some links as well to a couple of useful pages and also some external pages, namely the Python logging library, which, important to understand, is actually what the logger comp is wrapped around. So really underneath the hood of the logger comp is this Python logging library. And so by taking a look at the documentation for that, we can really understand a lot more about how that works and see some examples of that in practice. Then if we head to the palette logger page, this is specifically about the logger comp itself. We've got the usual documentation here with introduction to the component, all of the parameters, etc. But really, we can dive into the functionality that this offers on the palette logger extension page. So we've got a number of Python accessible members, which can give us all kinds of different information about the particular logger that we're accessing. And we then also have a bunch of methods for logging different types of messages. Now, what's important to note here is that we do have a sort of hierarchy of messages. If you've never dealt with this sort of thing before, it's helpful to head to the Python logging library page. Now, this is accessible via the palette logger page in the docs. And if we click this link here, it'll take us to the Python documentation, and we can then take a look at the logging levels section. So when we're creating logs with this library, and again, the logger comp being based on this library, we have a number of different logging levels that basically have to do with the, I guess, the importance or the maybe seriousness of the messages and the information that we're trying to log. Anyway, these are sort of suggestions for when you might utilize these different levels, and we have access to everything from the debug to critical via these different methods in the extension. So that's just a brief overview of what the documentation is looking like for this. I'll post the links to this in the description so you can take a look at it yourself. And without further ado, we can dive into TouchDesigner. All right, so we've got ourselves a blank project here. And what I'm going to do to start is to have a quick look at using the internal instance of the logger comp before we work on creating our own sort of custom functionality. So I'm going to start off with a text dat, which we'll use to just do some simple message logging, again, with this internal instance. So we'll have to reference our documentation one more time. To access the internal logger instance, we're going to use this op.tdresources.tdapp.logger Python expression. So what I'm going to do is open this text dat in an external code editor and go ahead and close some of these other ones I've got open. We're going to set up a variable called logger. And we're going to set that equal to op.td resources and then .td app logger. Now make sure you got the capitalization there correct, otherwise you won't be able to access the correct component. So we've got that stored in our logger variable. Now if we have a look at the logger extension page in the documentation, let's have a look under methods. So I think what we'll do to start is to log an error message into our log for this project. So that can be accessed via the .error method. So what I'll do here is type in logger.error, open and close parentheses, and then we can add a string here to define the message we want to send. So let's say this is an error message logging test. And then I'll go ahead and hit save. Another thing, since we'll be adding to this, I'm also going to set this up so that it is pulling in our Python formatting here. Save that one more time, head back to TouchDesigner. Now I'm going to open up the textport before we do this and clear that out. And then I'm going to right click and run this script that we've got. We'll see as soon as I've run that script, we have a little message in our textport and also up in this console section of the UI as well, which is the contents of that message that we've added to our log file. So this is what the sort of fully formatted version of that message looks like. And again, this is coming from the logging library from Python, and it gives us all kinds of information, including, the current day, time, what level of message we are recording to the log. So that's great. But of course, this is really just a confirmation within the program. We can also have a look at a specific folder on our computer at the actual log file that has been created. So if you're running Windows, you'll have to find your particular user folder, app data, local, derivative, TouchDesigner 099, and then the TD logs folder contains the log files from this internal instance of the logger comp. You'll notice that for each one of the projects that you are creating log files for, at least with this particular method, you're going to have two log files. You're going to have one that says td app logger and then another that says td sys logger. So the app logger log is the one that we are looking for. That is the sort of user-facing instance of the logger comp, and the sys, probably short for system logger, is intended for derivative internal use. You'll also notice, since I forgot to mention it, at the beginning of this file name, we've got the actual name of the TOE file that generated this particular log. So I'm going to double click on this logger recording td app logger.log file, and we'll see that our only message at the moment at the very top is the one that we just created. So that has again been saved exactly in the formatting that we saw inside of TouchDesigner to this external file. So for the next part of our project today, we're going to again start with a empty network. So I've just gone ahead and deleted everything that we had before. We're going to add a base comp to begin. So we're just going to kind of pretend that we are either building like an external component or a larger project. And this is going to be again, the kind of container for whatever we are building. So I'm going to call this base logging test, which is a very unique and descriptive name for what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to go ahead and then head inside of that operator. And what we'll do to begin is to open up the palette. So we can hit the icon over here on the upper left of the screen, or hit Control B or Command B on the keyboard. And then if we scroll down, assuming we're in the Tools category, to the Logger comp, we can then click and drag that into our project. Now, what that has done is to add the logger comp as well as a callbacks dat, which we can use to define some custom functionality along with the logger comp. So we're not going to be using the callbacks at the moment, so I'm going to dock that to the logger comp, and we can take a look at the logger comp itself. So we've got a number of settings over here on the right in the parameter window, which we're going to have a look at. And these include things like the log level that we just talked about. We also have the ability to choose whether or not we are sending those log messages to the text port and the status bar at the top. We also have the ability to choose where we're storing this information if we want to store it to an external file. So it does not have to be in that specific folder on the computer that the internal instance uses. We can have this anywhere we want, including in the project folder itself. So there are a few ways of accessing this component in our base logging test comp. What we'll have to do for either of those methods is to right click on the background, and maybe we'll start with opening the parent parameters for that base comp. So one of our options is to head over to the common page and create an internal op shortcut here, which points to this logger comp. Another method that probably you'll be more likely to use as you're building more complex projects is to reference this as a promoted variable in an extension. So what I'll do here is to right click in the background and click on Customize Parent Component. This has brought up the component editor window for the base logging test comp. I'm going to click on the extensions tab here, and we will make ourselves an extension for this comp. So I'm going to type in, let's see, we'll call this logging test ext in all caps, and I'll hit add. So before we go ahead and edit that code of our extension, I'm going to go ahead and rename this logger comp as well, just so we have a little bit more of a recognizable name to it. Okay, we're going to call this logger comp test, which is different from base logging test. Again, kind of trying to point out here that this is a logger comp and not a base comp that contains the logger. Not the greatest name choice, but you know, what can you do? I've gone ahead and renamed that. And then we can go into the logging test ext extension code up here. I'm going to hit yes here that I want to edit this file. And then we'll scroll down in this code. I'm going to maximize this window. Under this attributes section, we can set up a promoted attribute that will be accessible outside of this extension code. And what that means is that it's essentially going to be a Python member that we can access in other areas of our project as well. So for this example, we don't really need any of this additional code that comes with our Python extension class here. I'm going to delete everything really up to and including the attributes section. So I'll get rid of properties as well because we don't need that. And then under attributes, I'm going to type in self.logger with a capital L. We'll set that equal to op, open and close parentheses, single quotes, and this was logger underscore comp underscore test, not to be confused with the base comp. So assuming that that is correct, let me double check that I have not misspelled that. Looks good. I'm going to save, and we'll leave that open in the background just in case we need it. Now let's come back to our logger comp. So what we'll do first is to turn the active switch here on. And you'll notice as soon as I've done that, we now have a path to log file that has appeared in that particular parameter. I also am going to go ahead and turn on this log to file switch because I do want to log the different things that we're going to trigger here to that file. So now that we have set up that sort of connection from the extension, let's just do a quick test and make sure that this is functional. So we're going to add in a TextStat again, and I'm going to open that in my external code editor. We now are going to access this logger comp via the promoted attribute of the parent. So we're going to type in parent, open and close parentheses, dot, capital L, logger. And again, we can set this up to be a variable if we want. So maybe we'll use logger with a lowercase l and set that equal to parent.logger. What we should be able to do is to log a warning message because we haven't really defined anything else in the that logger comp at the moment. So I'm going to type in logger.warning. Oops. And then type in this is a test of the warning message, and then hit save. And again, this is not in Python format, so I'm just going to do that to add that context highlighting. Okay, with that entered in, I should be able to head back to TouchDesigner and right click. Actually, let's open up the text port again. I should be able to then right click on the text1 dat and hit run script. Now, what you'll notice here is that we have two copies of that message. They look identical to one another. And, if you were to go in and look at the specific text that we've got, even down to the timestamp, we have two identical versions of the exact same message. So I've got here the logger comp test file, which is new and was added when I activated this custom logger component. So if I double click that and take a look at the log that's been recorded for that component, we'll see that we've got only one instance of this message. However, if we take a look at the TD app logger file below that, we'll notice that we have the same message, again, recorded after that initial one that we recorded a couple of minutes ago. So what has happened here is that because of the settings in this logger component, we are logging this information both to the file that has been created for this custom instance of the logger comp, and at the same time that information is being duplicated to the sort of global built-in app logger as well. We have the ability to control that functionality. I'll just close out of the text port there via this propagate to parents switch. So by leaving this on, and the default is to have this set to on, that will duplicate whatever messages we are logging with this particular component to the app wide or the global built-in version of the logging system as well. So in the general settings section, we've got a couple of things we've already looked at, like our log level, the ability to log to text port and status bar. We've seen those in practice. The origin parameter here allows us to basically specify a particular component which will be used in the log message to kind of show us where the messages are coming from in our project. Next up in the file logger settings section, we've got a bunch of things relating to the potential log file that we're generating and or the logger name itself. Of course, we can set here at the top. If we are choosing to log to a file, we can specify the particular folder. We can open up that log folder via this shortcut. We get a path to the actual log file that we're generating. We can also add the process ID to the file name in case maybe we have a project that is using multiple processes at the same time and recording that information to a log file. We can again access via shortcut the log file itself, and then we have a file rotation parameter which allows us to choose the number of backup files to be kept when rotating the log. One more subtle point here is that we don't necessarily have to have our log to file switch turned on in order for us to use and log information from this component. If, for example, we're using this propagate to parents switch, we can, get the benefits of all of this custom functionality built out for this part of our project in terms of logging, but have those log messages transferred and propagated to those parent components instead. So again, we can choose whether or not we want to have that that file created at this point in our project, but that doesn't mean that our messages will not go anywhere and be recorded if we choose not to. At the bottom, we have the ability to create a callback dat and reference it, and or print the callbacks as well. So next up, let's use a chop channel to trigger the recording of log messages. So I'm going to use a timer chop here. It's common to use a timer chop to maybe send a kind of ping or a wake or a live message across networks, just to make sure that things are still functional. You could do the same thing even just to record a log message saying either that the message has been sent or even just showing that your TouchDesigner instance is still up and running. What I'm going to do with the timer chop here is to come first to the outputs page where I'm going to turn on timer pulse. I'm also going to turn on the cycle pulse switch, and I'm going to turn off the done switch and the ready switch because we don't actually need those. And I guess we'll leave timer fraction on just so we can see kind of where we're at. Back on the timer page, I'm going to set the length to 1. And then I'm going to set the cycle switch on. And now what I'll do is to add a select chop. And all I want in this case is the timer pulse and the cycles pulse channels. I'm going to take those and I will, there's actually a number of ways we could do this, but I'll use a math chop here to combine these chops via the maximum operation. Oh, and actually, I don't want to combine the chops. I want to combine the channels via the maximum operation. So that's going to give me the maximum value of either of those channels, which means that anytime that either channel pulses, we'll get the output of that in a single channel. I'll add a null at the end. Great. Then all we have to do is simply add a chop execute dat at the end here. I'm going to change the option here from value change to off to on. And then in this chop execute code, we'll type in parent, open and close parentheses, dot logger dot, I guess we'll just use warning again, even though we could, I guess, well, why don't we try this? We'll use info this time around. Info, and then we'll say trigger or timer pulse, and then Control S to save that. Now, if I want to be able to actually log the info message, I'm going to have to come back to this logger comp and set the log level to info. Now I'm going to go ahead and start the timer. And let me go ahead and open up the text port as well. And maybe even clear that and run it a second time just so we can see everything happening as it is. So you can see here, again, we've got the doubling of the messages being recorded because it's being propagated to the parent as well. That's okay. It is giving us confirmation that, you know, those are being recorded every time that we're getting a pulse out of this final chop. We also, besides having it up here in our UI, you'll notice that we have a little caution flag on the chop execute dat itself, which shows us those error messages right here in our little pop-up dialog. So we've got a third confirmation that that is going on. If I come back to the logger comp test comp, I can go ahead and click the open log file pulse switch. And if we scroll down, we can see that, well, it's been recording everything that I've been doing the whole time. So we've got, you know, quite a few additional messages here as well. But it does include all of those messages that we saw in the text port. Likewise, these would also appear in the app log file as well, since we are, again, propagating that to the parents. Finally, I just wanted to show another possibility here, which is to use the execute dat to do the same thing. So the execute data, if you're not familiar, includes a bunch of functions based on different events in your TouchDesigner program, I suppose. We can have things trigger on the start of the program, on the exit of the program, when we save the project, when we change our play state, etc. And so what I'm going to do here is use the project post save function just for the sake of this example, and then we'll go ahead and edit the code. So here, under our onProject post save function, we can follow, again, the same sort of thing that we've been doing the whole time. And this time I'll do parent.debug, and then I will go ahead and say, this is a debug message test. Save. Okay. Oh, and I want to make sure here, before I give us the wrong information, we need to do parent.logger. We need to access the logger. We can't go straight to the debug function without defining that as a custom function, which we haven't done. So anyway, parent, open and close parentheses, .logger.debug, and then the message in parentheses as a string. Save that, and then head back to TouchDesigner. And what we'll try to do now is see if we get a result. And you'll notice here, nothing has happened. Well, even though the log level here in the order of this menu is set up so that debug is above info, if we take it back to our little chart here in the Python documentation, it turns out debug is actually a lower level than info. So that is one thing to pay attention to. If we want debug messages, make sure to set the log level to debug. And then if I hit Control S to save, I'll see I got the little caution flag here. We've got my message ready to go. It has been recorded to the external file, and also, of course, propagated to the app level as well. Obviously, this is just really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to possibilities for using this logging functionality, but hopefully gives you an idea of how you can start implementing it into projects of your own, and also how it is really a very useful tool that has been added to the program. So with that, I hope that this has been a useful resource for you. Thanks so much for watching. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video.
Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you like our YouTube content, I highly recommend you check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. The HQ Pro is the only comprehensive educational resource and community for immersive design, TouchDesigner, and creative tech pros. In the HQ Pro trainings, we cover almost any topic you can think of, and we go way more in depth than we do in our YouTube tutorials. We have a private group where Matthew Reagan, myself, and our other industry veteran and pioneer teachers answer your questions every single day. If that sounds cool, click the link in the description to learn more. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more free TouchDesigner and immersive content.